Next up at UFC 267, we have a battle of the heavyweights. We have Alexander Volkov versus Marcin Tybura. Volkov 33-9 overall, 3-2 in his last 5, coming off of that decision loss to Cyril Gane. Marcin Tybura 5-0 in his last 5. Volkov, I mentioned, is coming off that loss to Cyril Gane, which was pretty one-sided, but I felt like he had his moments. I actually remember texting you, Jacob. I was watching it on my phone in the car, but I remember being like, this is kind of close. Volkov looks pretty good, at least earlier in the fight. So he definitely had his moments. Skill-wise, Volkov is a high IQ fighter. He's fast and has volume. He picks his shots well, and he will adapt in a fight. He does not have a ton of power, but his volume and his timing do suit him well enough to get some finishes. Despite that last-minute loss to Derek Lewis, he does have a pretty good chin, and he is a pretty durable guy. And speaking of durable, Marcin Tybura, also very durable. He's a grinder. He never quits, and he's busy everywhere. His striking is just okay, and he's more of a punches in bunches kind of guy. He's just going to throw a bunch of crap at you, not really set it up, not look to make it clean. He's just going to throw a whole bunch of it at you and see what happens. But and his strikes are really there just to set up his takedowns. If he gets a takedown, he'll pound on you till you quit. He doesn't really need to look for submissions. And because Volkov is a far superior striker, this absolutely becomes a striker versus grappler matchup. And if we dig into those stats a little bit, Volkov has a 67% takedown defense against Tybura's 45% takedown offense. I do think this fight is going to be a little closer than these odds, but Tybura is going to need to abandon his body locks because those are the takedowns he uses, and look for traditional doubles and singles and shoot normal shots on a taller guy. Body locks on somebody as tall as Volkov are not going to work. Tybura is going to have to lower his level, get to those legs, and try to get a takedown from there. I think it's closer than the odds say, but I do think it's a pretty straightforward win for Volkov. I'll let you go, Jakey Poo.
Yeah, I actually agree because I when I was picking this fight, I didn't see the odds. I was like, yeah, I think Volkov should probably win, but it's just kind of one of those weird fights where Tybura wins fights sometimes he shouldn't win. Like that Walt Harris fight, he was getting absolutely beat on, and then Walt Harris just gassed himself on, and then he flipped it around and TKO'd Walt Harris. But he doesn't really have the heavyweight power per se, and I think he's gonna struggle here against Volkov in this matchup because Volkov has the range. He knows how to use that range with his kickboxing. And you mentioned the Gane fight. That's probably the best anyone has even looked against Gane. He went 5 rounds and had his moments. Never really had Gane in trouble, but he looked decent. If you look at his last three losses, one was to Gane, one was to Curtis Blades, so he gets laid on for 5 rounds. And then the Derek Lewis fight, he was dominating until the last 15 seconds. So the crazy part for me is honestly Volkov, in my mind, for whatever reason, seems like an old guy. I think just because he's been fighting so often, he just seems like he's like 37, 38 on his way out. He had a little run, but now he's just going to kind of fade off. The guy's only 33 years old. This could still be the prime of his career. It should be the prime of his career. I think he gets the job done against Tybura. I think he gets it done kind of boring, but pretty easily for him, and just kind of a distant striking match. So I like Volkov in this matchup.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, we agree with that pick. And I do think it's sort of a goes the distance type fight because Volkov doesn't really have that knockout power. Marcin Tybura is a super tough guy. So I never do these specific props, but I may do Alexander Volkov by decision, and maybe I'll get better odds than the -300 we have here. Danny boy, it looked like you were back on the phone with American Airlines. Are you off?
No, they just keep checking in with me to tell me I'm still on hold, so it's very strange.
Very polite of them.
What's that?
It's very polite of them.
I mean, you're right. It actually is. There's nothing worse than sitting there and wondering if they're ever going to come back. No, yeah, I think Volkov is the pick, right? He's, like you said, he's a high IQ fighter. The range is going to be a problem for Tybura. And to be honest, Tybura has gotten fights to the ground, but I've just never seen him do it really in a way. I'm looking back on some of my notes from previous fights. He's never really looked great doing it, and Volkov is good enough to where, unless you're like a pretty good wrestler, you're not going to like flop him to the ground in some weird makeshift takedown, right? So I think Tybura is going to have a tough time truly getting him down, and Volkov's just going to pick him apart. So that's the pick. I think you're right, Jake. I think it's going to be a bit of a, jab and move, 1-2. Tybura is going to hold him a little bit. Volkov's going to separate. Lance pick some shots. I don't know that it's going to be an extremely exciting fight, but I think Volkov is the pick, probably by decision, because Tybura is pretty tough. So, yeah, I think that one's – I think it's a pretty clear-cut Volkov win by decision pick.
Yeah, and I mentioned I might grab that prop. I'll have to see what the odds are specifically on that prop. I don't think I'm going to do Volkov and DraftKings because outside of the 30 win points, for winning a decision, it's just going to be strikes, and those don't score well. This may be he wins a 30-27 unanimous decision and scored like 50 points in DraftKings. Yeah. Monkey knife fight is interesting though because it could be a lot of strikes, or it could be very few, even though it goes to a decision. So this may be a weird less, even though it goes 3 rounds type fight. But the safer play is probably more with Volkov dancing around, Marcin charging in, hitting the body with stupid little shots while he's looking for weird, as you said, Dan, makeshift takedowns. So more is probably the safe play with monkey knife fights. What do you think there, Jake?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's fine with me. I agree.
Oh, super useful. wewantpicks.com/MKF. They will give you an instant deposit match of $100. And all you need to do is say more or less on these strike lines, and you can 2.5 times your money, triple your money, even 25 times your money if you string a few of those things together.